Okay, everybody, happy Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. That took longer than it should have. Um, yeah, it's Tuesday. That's happening. It's not the worst Tuesday. I worked, obviously. I also played Animal Crossing. Work isn't, interesting to talk about, so I'm mostly let's talk about video games. And also, the cat is in my lap. She's very soft. We did go out for errands this morning. We are down to about twice a week. We do a liquids trip and then a separate trip for everything else because we don't have a car, so liquids are heavy and hard to carry. So we'll probably go again tomorrow. I'm working on trying to come up with an exciting plan for my birthday this weekend, which is, low priority, but also if I'm going to have a birthday in the middle of a pandemic, I might as well try to have fun with it. So, going to try making red velvet cake, which I've never made before. And also some muffins from my favorite bakery. Their seasonal muffin. Well, I call it their seasonal muffin because they usually have it in the actual store in spring. So I would be getting it now, except, it starts in April and they've been closed since St. Patrick's Day. So it's raspberry rhubarb. I saw some rhubarb at the grocery store last week when we went, so I'm hoping they still have it. And I'll be able to make those so that we'll be able to eat them for a few days, but it's sort of birthday adjacent. Then we're going to figure out some, dinner stuff. I do the cooking, so it's me figuring out what I want to make for myself for my birthday, which is fine. I'm down. I'm happy with it. Yeah. I'm also planning, obviously, how to celebrate in Animal Crossing and what kind of games I can play. I got this pitfall trap, which is kind of cool, I guess is the word. You bury it, and if someone runs over it, then they fall in and flail for a while, which is fun. So I saw a list online of games you can play in Animal Crossing. And some of them looked pretty cool, so I'm gonna see about setting those up. I've got some party favors. Yes, this is where we're at. To be fair, it's not like I generally do much for my birthday, as I think I mentioned, but now I feel like I have the pressure of planning it in Animal Crossing, which is entirely pressure from myself, but, why not? Yeah. Echo, stop scratching the dresser, honey. Yeah, that's good. You move away from there. Yeah. Not a lot to talk about today, clearly. Haven't played much Final Fantasy VII lately. I did read spoilers for the end that make me kind of curious, and I got to Red 13, who is, I guess, my favorite. Part of my problem with the original Final Fantasy VII is that I'm mixed on all the characters. Red 13, it doesn't really have any downsides, and he is sort of a weird dog lion creature, which I'm clearly a fan of, but he doesn't really get quite enough to do. And I switched over to Japanese voices. I can't remember if I mentioned that. And I don't love his Japanese voice. It's very deep, which I guess it should be because it's sort of supposed to be a surprise that he's relatively young for his species. Spoilers if you haven't played the original Final Fantasy VII and gotten to that part. But also he sounds sort of like a grizzled old man, and I'd rather he had sort of a more adult but not quite so gruff voice, which maybe he does in English. I switched to Japanese and it didn't actually work for several days, and I guess you have to, after you switch the language, you have to reset the game. So I found it out because we took the disc out to watch Lord of the Rings instead, which was a good decision. Yeah. We've been eating a lot of brownies, just a lot. Every time we buy a thing of brownie mix, and then we eat all the brownies, and then we're I guess we're getting another thing of brownie mix. Again, I don't regret this, but that's what's happening in our lives. Yep. Things are fine, proceeding as expected, I guess. No one in our family has gotten sick to our knowledge, so that's good. I assume we would have heard, or, like no one's gotten seriously sick enough to comment on it or anything, so that's good. We're happy about that. Britt is coming up on the end of the semester, which is good because it's very stressful for her with working and school and a global pandemic all at the same time. That's a lot of things. So we're very much looking forward to the end of the semester. I got some Legos for myself for my birthday because that's what I do. And we got the bookstore, which we're very excited about, but we're saving it until my birthday / the end of the semester for Brit as a sort of reward for her getting through it. And so we have it just sort of out on the floor and we look at it, and it's like that do it for her thing that Homer Simpson has up in his office, or in his, not his office really, his station at the power plant with the pictures of Maggie, but instead of pictures of Maggie, it's just a Lego set we're excited about. Which seems about right for us. Yeah. So we're reading Veni, vidi, vici. Luckily, there is not a lot of actual Latin in this because my teacher was never that into, like, us actually speaking Latin, and I was never good at it, and I've definitely forgotten most of what I knew about my Latin pronunciation, so good forward planning by me. This one's just over 3,000 words, so it should be pretty quick. And it is 8:02 p.m., which is the time I've arbitrarily decided to stop rambling and start reading. So let's just dive in here. Clark doesn't actually read into it when Maddie starts talking about Mr. Blake. Admittedly, there's a little pause when she says he's her Latin teacher, but it's just a little twinge. After all, Blake is a pretty common last name, and just because Bellamy liked classics in high school, there's absolutely no reason to think he's teaching high school Latin now. Especially not teaching high school Latin at Maddie's school. Honestly, what are the odds? So Mr. Blake is just another character in Maddie's life whom Clark pictures as if he's a character in a book she's reading. She actually imagines him kind of like Albus Dumbledore, mostly because, and this really is the number one thing Clark knows about Mr. Blake, he seems to be teaching her daughter witchcraft. Okay, obviously that's not what's happening. But Mr. Blake is apparently very dedicated to the teaching of Latin and, more surprisingly, the speaking of Latin. Not in a conversational way, he's not really expecting his students to be able to talk to each other. But reading Latin aloud is a skill, Maddie explains. Latin is her favorite class, which Clark feels is an accomplishment on Mr. Blake's part all by itself. Clark took Latin in high school because that was what high-achieving kids who were planning to go to a good college did, but the Latin program at Maddie's school seems to actually be kind of cool. Everyone takes Latin. Mr. Blake is just getting us ready for competitions. Latin competitions, Clark says, dubious. Yeah, there's one coming up in a few weeks. I can't go because I've got soccer, but I want to start going after. To Latin competitions. So you can read Latin aloud and do your weird chants. They're not weird, Maddie says, petulant. Clark has to smile. Sorry, not weird. You just kind of sound like you're performing dark magic in your room. And the bathroom. And the living room. Didn't you take Latin in high school? You know I'm not saying anything bad. Everything sounds bad when you chant it in Latin, Clark points out, but it's a fair point. All Maddie really does is, 1, read aloud scenes from her textbook, which she makes Clark assist her on, and 2, chant verb conjugations and noun declensions when she's studying. Unless saying amo, amas, amat over and over is going to summon some kind of succubus, there's no real concern that Mr. Blake is raising some army of warlocks. Well, not at Maddie's level, anyway. Mr. Blake apparently teaches older kids, too, so it could be that they don't get to demonic rituals until they're in AP. All of which means that, going into Parents' Night, Clark's expectations for Mr. Blake, Latin teacher and possible cult master, are that he'll basically be Albus Dumbledore, and she'll tell him that he's Maddie's favorite teacher, and she's thrilled that Maddie loves his class so much. If he seems chill, she might mention the cult thing, because it's kind of funny, but she doesn't really think it's going to be much of an interaction. Maddie likes Latin. Clark's much more worried about talking to the science teacher she hates. It seems like a pretty easy interaction until she's on her way to room 108 and she hears, from down the hall, the sound of Bellamy Blake's voice. That's when her whole life crashes to a halt. Bellamy was a crush. An easy kind of crush, the cute, somewhat mysterious boy a year ahead of her at school, the one she knew because the school was on the smaller side and they had similar interests. She got to talk to him enough to find out that he was mysterious because his family wasn't very well off and he spent a lot of his free time either working or looking after his sister, which was the kind of revelation that made him more attractive. He'd been a great first real crush, and she'd always been a little sad that she lost touch with him. He felt like the kind of guy who would be good to keep up with on social media, stalking pictures to see how he was doing and if he was still hot, but he deleted Facebook after he graduated college and she never found him anywhere else. Except, well, now she has. Here is Bellamy Blake, leading a high school Latin cult. She probably should have seen it coming. Excuse me, someone says behind her, and Clark startles, realizes she's blocking the hallway a little as she freaks out. Sorry, she tells the woman, flashing her a smile as she moves in closer to the lockers to let her get by. Clark never feels like she fits in at these, being so much younger than most of the other parents, and now she feels even more out of place. A high school kid herself again, an awkward teenager with a stupid crush. There's nothing to be done, though. It's not like she can just not talk to Bellamy. Even if he wasn't Maddie's teacher, it would be weird to ignore him. They are old friends. It should be nice to see him. His door is open, and the wall surrounding it is covered in doodles. Clark remembers Maddie showing her a couple tests with drawings at the bottom, explaining that Mr. Blake asked them to draw him cartoons if they finished up early. These must be his favorites, photocopied and taped up, and Clark is pretty sure she could spend a good hour studying all of them. It seems like there are a lot of weird in-jokes, people in togas doing all sorts of weird things and yelling taglines that probably make sense to Bellamy's students. Dwelling there now is tempting, but she makes herself go inside. There are a decent number of parents around, studying the various decorations, checking out whatever's set up on the desks, and then Bellamy himself, right in front of her as she walks in. He's facing away from her, leaning against his own desk as he chats with a small group of people, gesturing with one hand like he always used to. She can't see his face yet, but the view of him from behind is eerie, familiar but not the same. His hair is still a tangle of dark curls, but his shoulders are broader, his shirt stretching across what looks like pretty firm muscle. She can see freckles on the back of his hand, and she can hear his voice, deeper and rougher, smiling as he explains how he somehow got the kids invested in toilet demons, as a phenomenon. Bellamy Blake, live and in person. There's a small queue to see him, but Clark doesn't know how to just join it. Once he sees her, the conversation is going to shift, and he's going to stop being a teacher meeting with parents and start being a guy reconnecting with an old friend. Which is fine, but it's going to be a different vibe, and she's not sure how best to approach him. She doesn't want to keep him from doing his job, even if interacting with her is part of that job. But the wall with projects from Maddie's class on it is relatively deserted, so she dedicates herself to studying those, listening with one ear to the rise and fall of Bellamy's voice, waiting for there to be slightly less of a crowd. It's a little sad, and she definitely needs to either talk to him or leave soon, so she'll have time to talk to other people, but... Clark? She turns, and there he is, right behind her, this disbelieving smile on his face. The years have been good to Bellamy Blake. As Clark could already see, he's broader, more muscular, but it's not just that. He's wearing a pair of black framed glasses, and he's got a well-kept beard and somehow even more freckles. His looks have grown with him, which doesn't always happen, and it's honestly kind of the worst thing. It's been more than 10 years since she last saw him, and she still wants to drag him off to make out in a deserted classroom. She manages a smile of her own. Hey, Bellamy. I didn't want to interrupt. Holy shit, he says, wrapping her up in a hug. He smells the same, or similar enough, and it's been a while since she hugged someone like this, someone bigger than her, someone warm and solid and safe. What are you doing here? She pulls back before she melts, but her smile is getting stronger by the second. You're my daughter's favorite teacher. He pauses. I'm pretty sure my students are all old enough that you would have had to have the kid while we were actually in high school together. But he's always been quick. Understanding dawns in his eyes. Maddie's a foster kid. Maddie's a foster kid, she confirms. My foster kid. Holy shit, he says again. He runs a hand through his already messy hair. I had no idea. Neither did I. I just assumed there was some other guy with the last name Blake who wanted to get a bunch of kids into his Latin cult. He laughs. Yeah, there are tons of us. We've got a union. He might have actually gotten cuter. It's so unfair. This actually explains a lot. Yeah? Like what? I couldn't figure out how anyone got ninth graders so excited about Latin, but you were always the best at motivational speeches. You could get people excited about watching paint dry. Thanks, I think. Latin is cool. Keep telling yourself. She bites her lip. I actually didn't really have a lot to tell you, just that she loves your class and wants to get more involved in the Latin club once she's done with soccer. That would be awesome. She's a great kid, doing really well. I'd love for her to come to club events. He wets his lips. I don't really have any notes for you either, I guess. You guess? He clears his throat. There's a few things I'd call, standard foster kid stuff. She can be a little withdrawn sometimes, isn't always great with socializing, works better alone than in a group. It's nothing big, but I figure some people wouldn't be aware of it. But knowing you, I'm guessing you did about 5 years of research before you decided to start fostering. He's not wrong. So you were just going to bring it up if I seemed clueless. Like I said, she's doing well. I never thought her foster parents were shitty or anything. But I assume you're actually on top of stuff. I like to think so, but feedback is always appreciated. I'll keep that in mind. Another small group of parents comes in, and Bellamy glances over at them, clearly torn. I'd love to keep talking, but I should be... Yeah, of course. I still have a few more rooms to visit. She bites the corner of her mouth. You know, I live in your school district. It's not like we have to catch up at parents' night. I have a cell phone. He grins. Me too. What are the odds? They exchange numbers, and he gives her one more quick hug before she leaves. Good to see you, Clark. You too. I'm actually going to call you. Or, probably text. We're millennials. She laughs. Text would be good, yeah. You better. Not shockingly, her concentration is pretty shot for the rest of the evening. She meets Maddie's English teacher, who likes her, and her band teacher, who says she's a good student but not very musically gifted, neither of which is a surprise. The science teacher had been the wild card, and after a tense conversation, Clark's strong suspicion is that Maddie is right and Mr. Wallace is a douchebag who has it out for her. He's certainly a douchebag, if nothing else. Whether it's personal or not doesn't really matter. The event is winding down by the time she's escaped from Mr. Wallace, and her way out goes right past Bellamy's classroom. When she walks by, the other parents have left, and Bellamy's slumped at his desk, apparently completely worn out. Raven won't mind keeping Maddie for a little longer. She can be a little bit late. Rough night? Bellamy startles but recovers quickly, flashing her a smile as he straightens up. No offense, but parents are exhausting. None taken. Can I ask you an awkward question? Sure. Wow, not even hesitating? He grins. If I say no, I don't find out what the awkward question is. Is Cage Wallace as much of a dick as he seems like? As she hoped, that gets his old familiar surprised laugh. Yeah, he definitely is. I didn't know Maddie was in his class. My condolences. It's definitely her lowest grade, and she said he was the problem, not her. I always feel like kind of a shitty parent believing that, but hey, you're a way shittier parent if you automatically trust all adults over your actual kid. Unfortunately, there are lots of bad teachers, and Cage is definitely one. A lot of my students complain about him. Any tips on how to deal with that? It's a learning moment. I'd go over all her tests with her and back her up if there's anything wrong. It sounds like he loves knocking off a point or two for stupid shit, so I don't know. I let her decide if she wants to fight it or let it go, but I usually tell students that he's got a bunch of pet peeves, and if you learn them, you'll do better in his class. He shrugs. It's up to you, but I think if you validate her and tell her he's a dick, but there's no good way to get him fired, she might come around on doing things his way to get the grade. Maybe, Clark says. She can be stubborn. Your kid? Stubborn? She grins. She was like that when I found her. Look at it this way. Nothing's going to make Cage more pissed than having to give Maddie good grades, so the best thing she can do to piss him off is figure out how to do well in his class. Wow, you're pretty good at this. Between my sister and 5 years of teaching, I have a lot of experience convincing kids to excel out of spite. He checks his watch and then stands, stretches, loosens his tie. Okay, I'm officially done. Are you leaving? Yeah, I should pick Maddie up. My friend Raven is watching her. Is it just you? He asks. Just me? No partner? I don't see a ton of single foster parents. Oh, yeah, currently single. I read an article about how many older kids were in the system. Sounded like something I could help with, and I just did it. He nods. That's awesome. Can I walk you out? The careful formality makes her smile. Yeah. He shrugs on a coat and checks the room quickly before gesturing her out. There's still some other parents around, filing out, and it's strange for Clark to realize that she probably looks more like a teacher than a parent. One of Bellamy's co-workers leaving with him for the night. So, how long have you been fostering Maddie? 2 years. I'm working on adopting her now. There were complications with an aunt she didn't like who wanted custody, but she was finally deemed unfit, so I'm hoping that's going to go through soon. How's your sister? He huffs. Same as ever. It's tough, honestly. I remember you guys having trouble. He holds the door to the parking lot open for her. Yeah, it's a little better these days. I spent a few years feeling like she didn't go to college, she doesn't have a steady job, she never stays in one place that long. And I used to think that meant I fucked up, but that's just how she is. She's happy like this. Sorry, I didn't think that would be a downer. It's fine. Like I said, she's happy, doing well. We talk about once a week, mostly because I want to, but she's willing. The question feels a little too obvious, but she still can't help asking. Partner? No, single right now. Did you were thinking you were bi in high school? Is that where you ended up? Yeah. Cool, me too. He pauses. Now is where I'd ask you out if you weren't Maddie's mom. You can still ask me out, she says, trying not to let her smile take over her face. But I have to ask Maddie before I can say yes. Dating in general is okay, but since she knows you, I am her favorite, right? You are. She jerks her head toward her car. That's me. Okay. It was really good to see you. And if you ever want to get dinner, you should let me know. I will. And you should text me anyway. Yeah? I don't just want to make out with you. I think I still like you as a person. He ducks his head, laughing. You think? It's only been a night. Mostly I know you're still hot and fun to hang out with. And you're probably starting a Latin cult. Yeah, those are the three big things. He pauses, lingering like he doesn't want to go yet. So, we're definitely going to talk. She leans up to press her lips against his cheek, quick. We definitely are. Good night, Bellamy. It feels like he hasn't stopped smiling since he first saw her. That's pretty cool. Good night. Is she seriously chanting this early? Bellamy grumbles. It's not even a question, just pure resignation. I tried to warn you, you started a cult. He rolls over, giving Clark a nice view of his bare back as he grabs and checks his phone. It's his first time sleeping over, and she felt a little guilty about it, like she was doing something wrong. But Maddie seems good. Bellamy is her favorite, after all. It's not the chanting, it's the earliness. In my cult, we don't chat Latin in the bathroom before 9 a.m. on weekends. Isn't she a teenager? Shouldn't she be asleep? She's an early riser, and she's nervous about the competition next week, which is also your fault. No wonder she's my best student. He rolls back over, wrapping Clark up in his arms, giving her jaw a nuzzle. Without question, it's the best wake-up call she's had in years. Seriously, he murmurs, voice low. Does she do this every weekend? I didn't know I was so powerful. She does. Better get used to it. He grins. Yeah, I guess I better. Okay, so yeah, like I said, that's a quick one. Pretty short. We'll be back on Thursday to continue followers. So I will see you then or whenever. And I hope everyone has a good night. Stay safe, stay home, etc., etc. Y'all know the drill. Bye, guys.